Finished my midterms. Time to go back on the internet. I'm sure it's going to be a very positive environment, and it's going to be super, super fun.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
Now to avoid confusion, anytime a bit from Rose's video is playing, you will know with this border on the video. Anytime I'm talking in present time, it will be accompanied by this blurred background. Now let's start debunking. Now we've already established that Saitama is at least planetary without even trying.
Saitama is in fact only multi-continental as highlighted in the manga.
Nah, he's planet level. Depending on the translation you use in the data books, Boros could have meant that he was going to destroy the Earth or shave off the planet's surface, the latter being an extremely weird thing to say knowing that Boros' ship could already effectively do that. But I don't speak Japanese, I study Mandarin Chinese at university, so it does depend on interpretation on our end since the author hasn't commented. Also, Boros says this in the anime, and seeing as Saitama was fine on the surface of the planet, I'm gonna go with the idea that Boros literally meant he was going to destroy the planet, as it makes more sense in context.
The webcomic and manga are the highest construct of canon material.
Why? Where'd the author say this?
And the belief that Saitama is a starbuster.
I didn't say he was a starbuster. Saitama is at least planetary without even trying. On top of the fact that he's never had to try in a fight at all.
Now, using the assertion that one character is not trying in the attempt to create enhancement of extrapolated power, in this case would be to say Saitama can one-punch anyone, is a violation of invalid reasoning.
Not what I was doing. All I was saying that he was really strong as shown by the fact that he was never trying against such strong enemies. That's not even including the fact that he's a gag character. Don't believe me?
Nope.
Okay, show me where the author states he isn't a gag character.
And even then, the specific article Mr. Fallacy Man utilizes does not prove Saitama is a gag due to the fact the term parody character is also referenced.
You can be both a gag and a parody. I explained this in my original video, but you kinda skipped over that part.
The predominant way to prove Saitama is not a gag character is through the anti-gag narrative itself.
Anti-gag narrative was also something I touched on 2 entire years ago when I talked about parody and comedy not always having to be funny and can be an exploration of something deeper beyond itself without nullifying the fact that it is, at its heart, comedy, but you kinda skipped over that part.
One example can be given during the heavily emotional episodes of the aftermath of the meteor destroying the city. Saitama had to deal with the consequences of his actions, which led to a deep emotional scene. This type of display and performance contradicts the argument of a gag in its entirety. For example, if such was a true gag, then the city would have been destroyed entirely. Saitama would have said something ironic or comedic, and
Saitama did say something comedic. He called everyone baldies when he was the only baldy.
then the next scene, everything would be fine.
In the next scene, everything is fine because Saitama didn't actually care what they thought about him.
The best way you can debunk Saitama being a gag character, as I stated previously, is through the anti-gag narrative. Such narrative illustrates a serious, genuine, and continuous plot that focuses on the character development of secondary side characters, for example, the Heroes Association.
Deadpool accomplishes this by having a continuous plot thread that extends through the development of the main and secondary characters without ridding itself of comedy or the absurd nature of Deadpool's character.
For instance, a parallel example would be like if J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter series, stated that Harry Potter had pink hair, did not have a scar, and wasn't a wizard. That would be contradicted by the plot. Death to the author.
Good example, but she didn't say these things, and one never stated anything that was contradicting the plot of the show. You're also using the death to the author fallacy like it's law when it's not. Remember when this guy was Hulk? Me neither. Canonically, this guy has always been the Hulk in the MCU. Plot-wise, it's not contradictory to say this because this falls under the Word of God literary theory, which is directly contrary to the death to the author fallacy. Retcons by the author are canonical, even if they do something like switch out an actor or two. This falls under the Word of God, not death to the author. And stop using the death to the author fallacy like it's an end-all be-all when it's not. Sometimes things said by the author fall under the Word of God, which is canonical.
Mr. Fallacy Man reached out to me and sent me screenshots of what he believed proves Saitama to be a gay character, of which in addition he recorded and published a video with the exact same points. Now, first off, these 2 screenshots are from a wiki, meaning it's not 100% factual, therefore non-essential.
That's not at all what that means. Just because something is on Wikipedia does not mean that it's not 100% factual. That also doesn't imply that it is 100% factual. However, on the Psyche K Wikipedia page, if you look at it, gag is nowhere to be listed as its genre. But the moment you switch to Japanese, wow, it's listed under gag. It makes sense because it's a gag manga. Weird how the same thing happens to One Punch Man. But like I already said before, if you're so confident that Saitama is not a gag character, then change it. If you have the sources to back up that Saitama isn't a gag character, unlisted as a gag manga on Wikipedia. If it's so unreliable, you should be able to change it so easily.
However, just for argument's sake, we'll agree with Mr. Fallacy Man who argues that Saitama is a gag character whose gag is that he can one-punch any of his opponents. More simply put, Saitama will always have a higher AP than the antagonist. Now, the problem with that statement is that Saitama's gag does not extend outside of his verse.
Why not?
I know what you might be thinking, but Rose, didn't Arare's gag apply to the Dragon Ball verse?
Exactly. It literally did. You can't say gags don't work outside their universe and then follow up by saying that gags work outside their universe.
And this is actually exactly the hypothetical provided to me by Mr. Fallacy Man himself. To answer, yes, it did, and that's only because both mangas are licensed by the same author.
You then justify it by using author intent, which is the death to the author fallacy, because author intent shouldn't matter according to you. Even further, you saying a gag can't work outside its universe is like me saying Goku can't go Super Saiyan outside his universe. That's stupid. Just because DC doesn't have the key control like the Dragon Ball universe does, doesn't mean it would be fair to say that Batman vs. Goku would mean that Goku can't go Super Saiyan because they'd be outside their universes. You're taking something integral away from a character that completely nullifies the point of the fight anyway.
Toriyama can do whatever he wants with the characters and plot he has created, but that doesn't mean he can do whatever he wants with the characters he is not licensed to own or borrow.
He literally can. He just legally can't. If he wants to write a story with Harry Potter in it, nothing is stopping him other than copyright law. Beyond that, there's nothing actively in his way.
Essentially, the limits, rules, and laws created by the author are limited to only the verses and characters they have created or are officially borrowing from.
That's not true. Superman was able to lift Mjolnir, which has specific laws that were created in Marvel. They were then used in DC. You could argue that it was because they had the license to use them, but even so, that just completely nullifies the point. In the same vein, it's like asking me if so-and-so can lift Mjolnir if it's outside of their verse. If they're not worthy, then they can't. We don't forego the rules just because we don't have a license to use those rules in writing legally. That's not the point.
The same goes with another screenshot Mr. Fallacy Man employed, which states that Saitama has become strong enough to defeat all enemies with one punch. All enemies insinuates the antagonist within Saitama's verse.
You're arguing semantics. Doesn't state anything about it only being in Saitama's verse here. And you also missed the point. I was actually just referring to it literally being referred to as a gag manga here.
And to twist this scan into the support of Saitama's gag affecting outside verses,
I didn't. I just said he's a gag because it says it right here. Since I've been told countless times by Goku fans who tell me over and over that I'm using the no limits fallacy, but then they turn around and say that Goku has no limits because of his Saiyan blood DNA, blah blah blah, whatever.
the potential of power is not equivalent to actual power.
Never said it was. What I was doing here was calling out other people for telling me I'm using the no limits fallacy when they're using it themselves. I was making fun of diehard Goku fans and you missed that point.
The fact Mr. Fallacy Man doesn't know the philosophy behind the fallacies personally makes me question if he actually knows what he's talking about.
The fact that you've completely missed the points I was making in a lot of these makes me question if you actually know what you're talking about. Being able to take the gravitational force of a black hole like it's nothing, meaning that Saitama was not only breaking the laws of physics, like the gag character he is, but was able to surpass the laws of physics and move beyond the pull of the black hole, making him at least faster than light without even trying. That's using scientific standards of physics, and I just proved that Saitama's faster than light without even having to use the moon example.
That entire feat isn't canon.
Okay, but why? Burden of proof, my guy, you said it yourself.
計り知れないエネルギーを感じる。
Now, the keyword I would like to emphasize.
You know what? Before you start talking, how about you actually play the part of the video where I go over this in excruciating detail? Oh, you're not going to? You're just gonna straw man my argument and move on? Alright then.
Therefore, deductively, we can deduce that Saitama's energy is above Boris's comprehension. This, however, does not mean Saitama is planetary or above.
This literally would though, since Saitama wasn't trying on top of Boros not being able to quantify Saitama's energy even though he had the power to at least shave off the surface of the planet. It's a pretty reasonable jump.
I'd like to stop here for a moment to inform you all that this video created by Mr. Fallacy Man is all over the place.
I mean, not really. I pick at arguments and statements one by one similar to how you're doing. It's actually pretty easy to follow if you have 2 ears and a brain.
Meaning his statements typically build off of previous claims that I will have already debunked.
No, you didn't.
Basically, what I'm saying is, if I don't go over one of the points he makes in his video from here on out, it's because I've already debunked the structure of his argument, resulting in me invalidating it entirely.
Nah, the reason you don't go over one of the points is because you completely rid my points of their original context, apply your own, then strawman my argument so it's easier to take down. Similar to what you're about to do right now.
I'm saying that given all of this context, all of this feats.
This entire segment of the video is not essential.
Thank you for ridding this non-essential point of all its essential context. Much appreciated. Rose goes on to say that I'm effectively saying because it's called One Punch Man, that means that I think he can one-punch anything. Which is not at all what I said, but he completely glossed over my points in explanation to that reasoning, so I'll do the same in kind here.
It's not whether or not this character is named some way, it's whether or not someone uses it and believing it is valid reasoning. For example, if I was arguing that Beerus, the god of destruction, can destroy everything because he has the title of god of destruction, that would be invalid reasoning via name fallacy.
That's not what I was arguing, though. If you had listened to what I said, you might have actually understood what I was saying.
It is the action of applying irrational information when unnecessary that is the violation via the name fallacy.
Cool, but that's not what I was doing. Again, you completely glossed over and literally sped over my points without giving them proper context, applied your own context, strawman my argument, then proceeded to use that as a way to take it down. When I say Saitama is always holding back, here's what I mean.
Again, expendable segment, a character holding back does not quantify specific strength.
That's not what I was arguing. I just illustrated a point from earlier. I never used it to quantify a specific strength. Him not breathing in space isn't the thing you should be worried about. You should be worried about the fact that he doesn't just straight up die and suffocate in the vacuum of space as all the gases are forced out of his system due to the lack of pressure. Oh, wait. That doesn't happen because the laws of physics don't apply to him.
The premise that Saitama didn't die in the vacuum of space wasn't because the laws of physics do not apply to him. For example, he is still bound by gravity, and Mr. Fallacy Man even contradicts himself since he has also confirmed that Saitama can't breathe in space.
Again, you completely neglected to include the next part of my video, which explained this point even further with more context. Bugs Bunny can't breathe in space, Squirrel Girl can't breathe in space, gravity applies to Arale, which is part of the laws of physics, but you completely neglected that part of the video because it breaks down your straw man of me that you put up.
Using the concoction that Saitama is not affected by ebilism is the application of appealing to our own universe to argue for the absurdity of a fictional universe where the author cannot be reasonably expected to know of such conclusion that is drawn. Such as the violation of the reality fallacy, or better known as appealing to reality.
Cool, however, that's not the point I was trying to make. Again, I was pointing out how just because certain laws of physics apply to a character doesn't mean that they're not a gag character. Flashback to my Arale is affected by gravity point, which you neglected to provide in your video. If you accept that Arale beats Captain America, why can't Saitama's gags also be used in fights as proof of why he would beat other characters?
Because when using gag characters who do not apply to other verses, their gag is removed, however their feats remain.
That's stupid. Arale could only crack the earth because of her gag. Without that, she's not able to replicate that same feat. Don't try to tell me that a small little cyborg is going to take out a super soldier just because she cracked the earth once as a joke. This is a completely stupid point, it's just bad reasoning. I would go into more detail and explain it, but Rose is going to accuse me of using the argument from adverbosium. Doesn't even matter.
Saitama has only demonstrated multi-continental AP.
Not multi-continental AP, read the data book. Let me just quickly explain why the no limits fallacy isn't a fallacy and doesn't really work. I'll illustrate this point with an example. This is Bob. Bob is literally limitless. He can do anything, anywhere, anytime, anyhow, doesn't matter. I created him, I can dictate this, no matter how you feel about this, Bob is literally limitless. The no limits fallacy doesn't work on him because he literally doesn't have a limit.
So for one, he committed a fallacy in his attempt to debunk a fallacy.
I don't think you understand what illustrating a point is.
The no limits fallacy is applied when the character is stated to have no limit, or only certain limits, because it has not been demonstrated to have any.
What you're reading here and what you're trying to imply is actually the proof by example fallacy, which isn't always a fallacy, as certain arguments can take it and be applied as true without being fallacious. But keep reading your fan wikis and calling Wikipedia unreliable if you want.
Without the no limits fallacy, statements would be blown out of proportion. For instance, without such fallacy, I could simply highlight that Krillin is stated to be the strongest human, and because the no limits fallacy applies to cross-verse, without it in place, Krillin would therefore scale above Saitama, and Goku scales above Krillin, so Goku over Saitama.
Krillin in his universe is the strongest human, save for Hercule, who's above Master Roshi. I'm obviously kidding, but Master Roshi is above Krillin. Fight me, that's the truth, but still. Krillin's title as the strongest human in his universe is indicative of something relating to his power, which is what I tried to imply before, but you cut that part out of your video. Goku didn't Hakai Jiren, case in point. But Josh, Goku didn't Hakai Jiren because insert whatever reason here.
Well, my reason is because Goku in the anime doesn't have the ability to use Hakai. Manga Goku does. Goku used it on Merged Zamasu, who scales above him, meaning that Hakai can work on stronger beings.
Goku used Hakai and it only destroyed half of him. Convenient how you left that out, which furthers my point that Hakai isn't just an end-all be-all.
Let me educate you on Hakai.
No, let me educate you on Hakai. Because you're acting like you're disagreeing with me when all you're doing is proving my point.
Stronger beings than the user can negate it with their own ki.
We agree on that. It's exactly what I was getting at. Hakai has been stated to have limits. It's not an end-all be-all. Goku can't Hakai Beerus, he can't Hakai Whis, and he can't Hakai Zeno. All I was trying to say is that if someone was stronger than them, like it was their gag or something, Goku wouldn't be able to Hakai them by the rules set up in canon.
This last portion of the video was basically Mr. Fallacy Man imitating me, and I must say it was just about one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Well, this is just false, because this is just just fuss, because this shit is not funny and could have been a hell of a lot better had I put more time into it. But I'm a busy guy, and I didn't have much time to actually put as much effort as I wanted to, though I'm glad I got to use my Pikachu onesie.
The whole point of the skit was him attempting to debunk a claim that I made about gag plot.
Yeah, and the point you made was broad and stupid then, and here it's more focused but still stupid because it doesn't work when applied to everything equally. You effectively said that gag characters can't exist in a story with a continuous plot thread, but they do.
Overall, the video as a whole could possibly be considered to commit the argumentum ad verbosum fallacy.
Oh wow, so you're saying that the proof by intimidation tactic is what I'm using here when I actually give context and proof to my points?
Due to the repetitive claims being drawn out of proportion, as in creating a complex infrastructure in place of a simple claim.
Nope, my simple claim in the end was that,
If you don't think Saitama could beat Goku, you missed the joke.
said 2 years ago when I made my original video, and you, sir, 2 years later, still missed the joke.